welcome back. So in this video, I am going to be talking about the last type of selector. These are called attribute selectors. They're a little bit complicated once you get started, but once we actually start using them, they become very easy to use. So first of all, what is an attribute selector? Well, as we know, in HTML, we can actually add attributes to all of our elements. So for example, this image here has an attribute of source, which tells the image tag where the source of the image is. But what we can actually do in CSS is use these to our advantage. We can select certain elements that for certain attributes and their values. So for example, let's go ahead and try and rewrite this subtitle class here. So we know if we go over here that all of our subtitle classes are used in H2s. So what I want to do is actually rewrite this in terms of our attribute selector. So what we do is first start off with our tag name, which is H2. But then inside of some squared brackets, what we do is type attribute is equal to value. Okay? So obviously, we're not going to do it like this. We're going to have to select some certain attribute. But what this allows us to do is actually select certain things or certain elements based on their attributes. So in this case, we want to select everything that has the attribute of class. And we want to make sure that the class itself is subtitle. Okay? Now, you do not need quotation marks for these. Unlike how they were in HTML, you can see we do need quotation marks. But in CSS, we don't actually need them. All right, so there we go. We have rewritten our class here, but we've written it in a way that allows us to select it based on the attribute of it itself. So let's go ahead and refresh the page and see what happens. You can see that they stay exactly the same. Now nothing has changed. If I go ahead and change this back to .subtitle, just like that, and refresh the page, you can see nothing's changed. So that's pretty basic. Now, it doesn't just have to be class. We can select it based on many different things. So for example, if I wanted to select this image over here, I'm going to go over to the bottom. I could say image, image, and then the source has to be equal to something. All right. So there we go. Now we've done that, but there's actually more than one type of selector. Now, usually this is the basic one where you just equate one side to the other, but there's actually many more types of selectors which allow you to kind of modify the attribute selectors and make them much more powerful than they are right now. So how do we do this? Well, I'm going to be covering just a few of them with you today and showing you how you can use them. So we have two images on this page. Now, both of them are located in this image folder. Do you think that there's any way that we can select both of them in one go using an attribute selector? Well, there actually is. So here's what we have to do. First of all, let's find the common factor between these two images. They both are contained inside this folder. So they both definitely start with this path, /img/. Both of them are going to contain this. And if we actually go back and look, you can see that both images actually do contain this link here, wherever the other image is. There it is. So there we go. Now we've done that. But remember that this is direct equating. This has to be equal to this. And unfortunately, neither of them are equal to that. So how do you think we fix this? Well, all we have to do is put a caret behind the attribute, just like this. So what this says is every single image where the source contains or starts with this piece of information. What comes after it doesn't matter. But what we're doing is selecting all of the images where the source attribute starts with this value right here. So you can already see how powerful this is. Now, if we go ahead and refresh the page, obviously, we can't see anything because we didn't add any styles. But I'm going to go ahead and add a quick style for you. Now, you don't need to know how to do this. I'm actually going to make it a little bit more obvious. So you don't need to know how to do this. We're going to cover it later. But you can see now both images are covered in black. Okay? So there we go. That's just one way, one of the selectors we can do. We can also change this to a $sign. And in this case, it's going to be make sure that the source attribute ends with this value. Okay? So there we go. We can do that. Obviously, the style isn't going to work anymore because this doesn't apply. But there's also another one that we can do, which is using a star, or the multiplication symbol. And pretty much what this is if it contains it anywhere in the value, for beginning, end, middle, doesn't matter. As long as it contains this, it's going to be there. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh, and you can see now that works because both of them do contain this. So those are the three basic ones, but there's also some more complicated selectors. Now I'm going to go ahead and cover them, but you don't exactly need to know these because they're a little bit complicated. So I'm just going to go ahead and do them. The first one is called a white space attribute selector. So pretty much, if you don't know this already, you can actually add multiple classes to something in HTML. So I'm actually going to go ahead and add another class to these subtitles, and I'm just going to call it just something random, article subtitle. Obviously it's a little bit confusing, but just bear with me. So you can actually add multiple classes or multiple arguments separated by white spaces or spaces inside these attributes. Now, obviously, this is specific to some a very small number of attributes, but you can do this. Now, just keep that in mind for now. What we're going to do is go forward and start using this. So I'm going to go ahead and select anything that contains this this class specifically. Now, I could do, maybe the attribute selector where it ends in this or contains it, but there is another selector that we can use. So I'm going to go ahead and say h2, and of course the attribute is class, and it's this symbol, it's this symbol, okay, and then equals, and then our value. In this case, it's going to be our class, which is article subtitle. All right. So now we can go ahead and add whatever we want. So I'm actually going to go ahead and give it a background. Now, again, you do not need to know what this is yet. I'm just trying to vary up the properties a little bit here. So let's go ahead and refresh the page and see what happens. You can see that a green background has been added to this. I'm not going to try hovering over that. It's a little bit discomforting, but you can see that a green background has been added to it. Now, this could be used for using a contain attribute selector, but this is a little bit more specific, and it only works for things that are separated by white space. So if you want to isolate certain elements that contain a certain class, for example, you can do it with these class attributes, and that would work perfectly. So the next selector I'm going to talk about is a little bit more complicated, and it's very similar to the first one that we talked about, which was the general attribute selector, the one where it's exact equality. But there's a little bit of a difference here. There's actually one exception to this. Now I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate it here, okay? So pretty much what this is saying is find every h2 where the class is either equal to directly article-subtitle or article-subtitle with a dash. So, and again, it does have to start with this. So it can't just be containing followed by a dash. It does have to start with this. So why would you want to use something like this? Why can't you just use the exact equality? Well, this is a pretty basic site right here. Now, we're not really doing anything complicated or any multiple style sheets or anything like that. But sometimes when you want to have multiple elements or you want to build libraries, you can create multiple elements that are followed by an ID. So for example, just list them here. I'm going to actually put this in a comment. So I could have subtitle dash and then some ID like that. Subtitle dash and then again some ID. So you can see why we would use something like this. Pretty much what you want to do is select everything that has subtitle and then the dash in it. And you're probably also wondering, okay, why can't you just use one of the other selectors, like something that starts with it? Well, sometimes this is contained in a chain, or sometimes there's multiple dashes, and on top of that, sometimes it may change. Maybe this could be in the middle of 15 other classes. So you can see why you'd want to use something like this, and although it's not used very commonly, it's still very important to know. Alright, so those are pretty much all of the advanced attribute selectors. Like I said, you aren't going to use these very commonly, but again, it is good to know they are very powerful selectors. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Go ahead, like I said, with every single video, practice and just try using these selectors on your own. All of the project files are available on GitHub. The link to the repository was posted at the beginning of the course, so you can go ahead and check that out if you want to download the files and work with them. But other than that, there we go. That's pretty much it for selectors. Now we can actually move on and start using CSS. All right, let's move on.